Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rachel Paul with IAAP. And before we get started with today's session, we did have a few housekeeping items. We do have closed captioning provided. You can select a closed captioning icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we also have ISL interpretation today. I'm going to go ahead and turn this program over to our host, Samantha Evans, and to go ahead and get us started.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today from wherever you are around the world to meet with us today about our COSP 16 program hosted by G3ict and IAAP. And we're going to talk about building the accessibility profession in support of CRPD implementation. So I'm joined today by several of some of the best colleagues I've had the opportunity to work with around the world. My name is Sam Evans at IAAP. I am the certification manager. So I work with the subject matter experts all around the world, the accessibility professionals who build, design, develop, and help us maintain our certifications. And I am joined by several of our other colleagues, Mohammed Lufti, who is one of our colleagues with G3ict. He's the Director for Capacity Building and Advocacy and Digital Accessibility Rights Education, the DARE Academy with G3ict. Also, Rachel Paul has introduced herself as our host today. I'm joined by several of your colleagues, Eric Ngondi from Kenya, who's the Director of United Disabled Persons of Kenya, who's a CPACC, CPACC. I'm also joined by Beatriz Gonzalez Maiz, who is CPWA. She holds both CPACC and WAS and ADS. She's the head of accessibility and digital inclusion in Central Europe at ATOS. And we are also joined by Sherry Bernhaber, who also is a CPACC, and Sherry is the Senior Staff Architect and Accessibility Innovation and Outreach at VMware. Sherry is also a IAAP GLC Global Leadership Council member and a member of our certification committee, and as a longtime volunteer leader at IAAP, also brings great insights about the purpose and intention of IAAP and our work in support of the rights of people with disabilities. So this is who will be joining us today. I am looking at our participant list. I see we have people from all around the world. I will be monitoring our chat and questions and answer sessions. So as we work together as a group, we have more than 50 of us here for the panel today. If you are able to, please use questions and answers, Q&A, for questions that you would like to pose to the group. You can also use chat, certainly, to talk amongst yourselves and with the group. If you want to add comments, I see lots of greetings for people from around the world. So we are looking forward to having our discussion together today. All right.
Thank you, Sam. This is Rachel. I'm sorry for the interruption. I just want to ask for 1 minute. If I could have our other interpreter, Yola, just turn your camera on for 1 second so I can spotlight you. That way I don't have to switch back on when in the middle of sharing the screens. Thank you. You're all set, and I'll go back to sharing the slides. Sorry for that interruption.
Wonderful. So I see that our colleague Mohammed Lufti is here, and Mohammed, we have invited you to make our introduction today to talk about Article 9 in the UN CRPD, Article 9 being the part of the CRPD that requires state parties and their constituents to ensure that information and communication technologies, ICT, products and services are accessible to people with disabilities, and perhaps bring an introduction about how the complexity of these tasks to achieve this objective is what fostered the emergence of the accessibility profession, and that's led by IAAP. So Mohammed, I'll invite you to speak a bit about the UN CRPD and Article 9.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Lutfi. I'm Director for Capacity Building and Advocacy under the Institutional Relations and Advocacy Department at G3ict. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I would like to highlight the significance of Article 9, which is the main article that addresses issues of the rights of persons with disabilities to technology and digital accessibility. It's an important article that addresses this issue from different angles, starting from ensuring that policymakers, especially that governments are they have the mandate to adopt laws and regulations that comply with the CRPD. And for the digital accessibility part, the article urges governments to make sure that their laws and regulations take into consideration and have definitions and identify strategies for enhancing the rights of persons with disabilities to digital accessibility. And also, this article is very crucial to be the anchor of awareness-raising initiatives targeting private sector and industries to make sure that, number one, they adopt standards of accessibility to make sure that their products and inventories are inclusive for persons with disabilities. Also, for private sector companies to make sure that they are also providing the reasonable accommodation that ensure that persons with disabilities or employees with disabilities have the chance to have access to information and technology that they need at the workplace. Also, it's an important article for promoting products that are accessible for technology products that are accessible for persons with disabilities. And it's been the anchor for inspiring all of the initiatives that we hear today about standardization for digital accessibility, whether through ISO or WCAG or the FCC here in the United States to adopt the standards or to develop the standards that different stakeholders, whether public, private sector, civil society, international organizations, have to adopt to ensure that persons with disabilities have access to technology and also to bridge the digital divide, especially for persons with disabilities in the global south. It's an important article as well, Article 9, to urge governments to make sure that the ecosystem with the regulations or also infrastructure of technology for web access or mobile access, mobile technology access for persons with disabilities are ensured. For us at G3ict, I would like to highlight that we work tirelessly, whether internally through our different departments, with our IAAP, the advocacy department, and so on and so forth, to encourage, to create opportunities for enhancing the professionalism of persons with disabilities and others in the field of digital inclusion and digital accessibility. For example, the DARE Academy that I manage is a program that offers scholarships for persons with disabilities, and I'm glad to see Eric Gundi from Kenya, who received a scholarship through their academy, and we have just also released 10 names of 10 new recipients of the scholarship for this year. Also, G3ict runs a series of training workshops with governments. We have worked in the past with governments like Dominican Republic, Turkey, and others, and also through our smart cities initiatives. I'm sure that we will discuss later in this session, that will also promote the rights of persons with disabilities to smart cities through our different modalities of like the maturity model and other modalities that G3ict offers to stakeholders to become more inclusive in terms of their digital platforms. And also Enabling Summit, it's an annual event that fosters innovations of industries and enhances the dialogues, offers a platform of dialogue and exchange of knowledge and best practices among different stakeholders in the field of digital accessibility, whether in the industrial side, engineering side, policymaking side, and also take into consideration that digital accessibility is a human-centric, addressing needs of persons with disabilities and other beneficiaries of digital accessibility, especially that now we are coming to the negotiation of the new treaty on aging. I think I went beyond my time, so I'm here to answer any question as well. Thank you, Sam.
Mohammed, thank you so much. And we so appreciate our ability to work with our colleagues at G3ict and their great work with the United Nations and for rights of people with disabilities around the world. So I am going to take a quick pass to introduce IAAP. We are the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, and we are one of the 4 divisions of G3ict. The mission of IAAP is to define, promote, improve, and diversify the accessibility profession globally through certification, education, and networking in order to enable the creation of accessible products, content, services, and environments. Also, our vision of universal design at IAAP is that implementing universal design principles takes everybody into account and leads to fully inclusive and sustainable digital built environments. So IAAP was originally founded in 2014 when 40 organizations and their leaders came together to talk about the need for an organized and directed pathway to bring accessibility professionals together and to start a career path and a professional recognition for accessibility as a unique proposition and a unique value in organization, governments, and policy. IAAP began with those 40 members in 2014. We now have 5,500 plus members. We have organizational members that can have more members in their companies, as well as individual members. We are in more than 100 countries around the world and have 7 regional chapters that work within their local or more geo-local areas and languages. On the slide that we have before us, there is a small map on the left-hand side that has stars with representing the 100 plus countries around the world. Their stars are in blue, and the map is faked and pale in the background. We do have a lot of industry sectors that we represent, including IT, government, education, telecom, healthcare, consulting, finance and banking, assistive tech, disability services, architecture, engineering, travel, tourism, retail, and transportation. I want to give a little background about our certification history. And so just for reference, we have CPACC, or the Certified Professional and Accessibility Core Competencies. And that began in 2016 with 35 people who earned the CPACC in the first pilot. In 2023, we have now awarded a total of 3,793 CPACCs to people in 110 countries around the world. WAS is our Intermediate Technical Certification Web Accessibility Specialist, or WAS. We began with 11 people earning the WAS in the pilot in 2017. And today in 2023, we've awarded 1,187 WAS in 67 countries around the world. For those people who earn both CPACC and WAS, we grant a third credential, CPWA, and there are 664 people who've earned both CPACC and WAS. So that's a little background about the certification. So I'm going to invite our attendees that are here with us, our panelists, and our accessible document specialist is our most recent, that began in 2019. And we now have just under 100 people who've earned ADS, the accessible document specialist. But we invited some of your colleagues here, accessibility professionals, to speak about, we'll start with CPACC, about the Certified Professional and Accessibility Core Competencies. And so CPACC has core foundations focused on understanding disability and equal access for people with disabilities, and we'll post information about CPACC in chat. but I wanted to invite each of our panelists to speak a little bit about your original motivations to pursue CPACC or CPACC. And Eric, I'm going to invite you to start. Eric was a DARE Academy Scholarship awardee and works in Kenya. So Eric, I'd like to invite you to spend a few minutes. Tell us a little bit about your professional background, your work in advocacy, and how you decided to originally pursue CPACC.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric.
Fantastic. I've always been interested in the area of accessibility. My background is in environment engineering. I did that for about 5 years until when I graduated, and then I lost sight through violent robbery. And the area of having my background in engineering, the area of accessibility has always been an interest to me, first simply because when I got back on my feet, one of the things that really assisted me is the issue of accessibility, specifically technology accessibility. And when I joined the disability movement, I realized that this is one of those issues that we talk to a lot as one of the biggest barriers that persons with disability face, in addition to things like attitudinal and institutional barriers. So for me, accessibility has always been an area of interest in terms of passion, in terms of the things that I can do, and also in an area that I can develop a sort of a professional career. So in terms of advocacy, I'm part of the disability movement in Kenya. United Disabled Persons of Kenya is the umbrella body of organizations of persons with disabilities in the country, and champions or has this mandate of championing issues about disability in terms of advocacy and lobbying at the national level and even at grassroots level. So for me, that has been my background. And maybe if I could go on, I'd just say that when I saw the opportunity of DARE Academy, the Disability Accessibility Research Education, the DARE Fellowship, I was interested and I applied, and I thank God I got in. And for me, one of the best thing was the opportunity to undertake this accessibility CPACC, CPACC. And one of the great things I realized about it is that it concretized my knowledge of disabilities from the issues of understanding disability deeply, but also the issues of accessibility, the issue of universal design, looking at standards and laws and regulations around disability globally, that is. So for me, it has been an opportunity, and I'm still very much interested in this space as a profession and as also an advocate on the rights of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And Eric, can you speak to how you believe or what your thoughts are about how professional certifications like CPACC or CPACC, how that will benefit people in their work, the knowledge or the learning? Can you speak just for a moment about the information covered and how that will enable you to better deliver, or for others considering how that will benefit them in their work and their goals?
True. First, one of the things I've really been encouraging, specifically persons with disability, is to take on such certification, simply because not only does it make you a person with knowledge on the issue of accessibility, but you also have something to show in terms of the amount of knowledge or the experience or the expertise you may have around this area of accessibility. So it's not just about talking the issue of the accessibility, but you can also show something that you went through, you are trained on, and you can actually deliver on this. I also encourage persons who are not without disabilities to take on this, simply because then you're able to understand persons with disability on a holistic level. So the issues of impairments, the accessibility needs, the assistive technology, and deeply, not on the surface, understanding the issues around all this. Again, I can add that accessibility, taking on such certification puts you in a place to advocate better in terms of maybe then at the national level, calling on the policymakers, the duty bearers, and so on and so forth. You can also use the ability of the certification in terms of even opportunities. So, for example, training organizations issue of disability etiquette, training organizations on issues of accessibility audits, taking them through the issue of assistive technology, reasonable accommodation. And for me, I see this an opportunity that persons with disabilities can actually develop and be an opportunity to even gain some source of resources in terms of self-employment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Beatrice, before we talk about WAS, would you like to offer some thoughts about CPACC and how the knowledge and organization is beneficial to those working to advance the rights of people with disabilities for yourself, your work, and or for customers, for clients, for business?
So at Atos, I am part of the digital workplace practice. Before I was working on digital products, but now I do work with assistive technologies and all sorts of disabilities in different workplace situations. In this case, CPACC is a great base for my work because it gives me insights into different aspects of how we can enable people with disabilities to participate in the workforce and to give their best. One interesting thing I had no idea of was universal design for learning. And I can tell you in the next couple of years, as soon as my oldest daughter gets to school, I'm sure I will be reviewing all those contents again and be advocating for UDL at her school. So I know that the earliest we start, the better. So shift left at its core, right? On my original motivations why I took the certification, I had been working as a user experience consultant in IT, and I realized that having a UX certification made my interactions with my colleagues and my customers a lot easier, smoother. I did not have to justify every time that I know what I'm doing, that I know my work and I am a professional. Some customers were actually very, very shocked after talking to me and finding out that I can actually code and I can tell developers with experience how to implement the designs efficiently. It saved me a lot of work and time on unproductive discussions, and it allowed me to actually do my work. I was specializing more and more in accessibility and inclusive design and inclusive user experience, and I wanted to avoid the same discussions over and over again. In the accessibility field, there is already enough work having to sell accessibility so that people understand the ROI and why it's important. And it was already a lot of work without having to add the gender bias to the backpack that I was carrying. You're muted, or I don't hear you. You're muted, Sam. We don't hear you.
Sorry. Sherry, I was going to ask you if you might just speak for a moment from the perspective of working within a large entity about the value of CPACC and those core foundations for people who are coming into roles who may not have disability rights background and accessibility understanding, and from hiring manager perspective, what your thoughts are on CPACC for organizations.
Sure. So I was in actually the first group of people that was certified for CPACC. My background was that my disability and accessibility knowledge was mostly homegrown. And so I wanted to test it against a standardized test to see, do I know what I actually think I know? From the hiring manager perspective, it makes interviews much easier. because you can anticipate that the individuals with the certifications have a particular level of knowledge, and you don't need to grill them on those things. It also means that I can bring in people who know nothing about accessibility as interviewers, and they can interview those individuals on soft skills and other things, because we just don't have to worry about the accessibility skills, because we know they're at the level at a minimum that the certification has been granted for. So we include the certification in our advocates program. So we have a company-wide accessibility advocates program, and to get the highest level of badge that you can put on your LinkedIn and on your internal emails, you have to take the CPACC. So we have, I want to say maybe half a dozen so far, people outside of the accessibility team that have become credentialed in this because they're disability advocates for one reason or another. In fact, I'm proctoring an exam today for two of the individuals that I've been mentoring. So it's very well integrated into how we interview for the accessibility team, but also how we advocate for accessibility outside of the accessibility team.
So thank you, Sherry. This is Sam again. So we're going to move to talk about Web Accessibility Specialist, WAS. The Web Accessibility Specialist certification does have a minimum requirement of a minimum of 3 years of first-person experience performing the job tasks that are covered in the WAS body of knowledge. So certifications are based around job tasks. What are the jobs? What are the actual activities people will encounter doing this work? And so each of the certifications does have a body of knowledge with job tasks. For WAS, it is not just context knowledge and concept knowledge and understanding, but it does have a requirement of a minimum of 3 years of experience to qualify as a candidate. WAS covers technical digital accessibility and accessibility manual testing and QA, along with audit and remediation recommendations. So I'm going to ask Beatrice if she would be willing to speak to a little bit about why this is important, how digital accessibility, number one, tying to CRPD, how digital accessibility provides access to live, learn, work, and play in our communities of choice, and how that work is part of your professional career, and what made you decide to pursue WAS. Beatrice happens to hold all 3 of our core certifications, so is a great advocate in Europe. And so Beatrice, could you speak just for a moment or two about WAS and technical digital accessibility?
This is a good one. So the world and the societies we live in rely more and more in digital technologies to function, from education to democracy, passing through work and finance, which are very important topics for self-determination. Web accessibility advances the goals of the CRPD by making the goals technically possible. Accessibility helps reduce discrimination and barriers to the access of information. It supports freedom of expressions and opinions. For example, if social media is not accessible, some people will not be able to consume or create content that can support thought diversity and advance our societies. Accessibility enables full participation in the digital society, both at work and employment on the one side, and culture, leisure, sports on the other, which is also very important to live a full life. Accessibility technology is also, sorry.
I was going to say, can you talk a little bit about how ATOS relates this for both your customers and your work in ATOS, and how that technical accessibility, especially the requirement for experience, how does that help you, and how does that help organizations and companies when they are considering bringing someone onto a technical team?
So more and more we get in because of the new regulations in Europe that are coming to the table. At the beginning it was only public sector, and now it's going to affect all public, private companies. There is a lot of people that have seen a business value in accessibility, but don't have maybe the actual experience in delivering accessibility projects. So they're just trying to hire people. They think they can find people with expertise that maybe they could find for cloud, for AI, for other type of topics. And there's a lot of bad name to accessibility. Firstly, because accessibility is usually an afterthought and is not embedded in the projects. So I'm seeing more and more and more requests for proposals and informations on accessibility testing. And there's not so much on accessibility strategy and how you can embed accessibility in the processes. So the WAS certification and this expertise gives you a broader picture. So you don't focus only on testing, which is of course very, very important. You need to know where you are in order to get where you want to be. You need to know where you are. So that there is no discussion that testing is important, but it's not the whole thing. And everyone starts with testing. And once you get more experience and you learn more by doing, you realize all the things that you need to do before you get to a finalized product. And I think the issue with the certification is that it shows you first that the professionals working in your teams have had this experience and this aha moment. So there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. First of all, there's a lot of misconceptions and mythos and misunderstandings with accessibility and disability inclusion. And on the second part, people who start learning, they get to a point where they're very confident about all the things they have learned how to do. And the Dunning-Kruger effect shows that when you get to a certain point, you realize the I only know that I know nothing moment. Disability and accessibility is very complex. Not one single person can know it all. I have all the certifications, I have all the stamps, but I know I am at the beginning after being in this world for like 16 years and being taken into account, learning and paying attention. You always need to listen, and co-creation and involving people with different perspectives is the way to go. And I guess in this, I don't know if that supports your question, but I think that the best thing about the experience is that you know all the things that you don't know. You start learning and see the path ahead of you.
And this is Sam. Sherry, could you speak a moment about the not just the concept knowledge, but understanding why the concepts that are presented in WAS are important, but also the experience and how that relates to hiring and for teams to be able to understand proficiency, being able to come in and do the work effectively based on that experience, in addition to the concept knowledge.
WAS is not for newbies. WAS involves making recommendations. The skills inside that somebody who has a WAS possesses involves making recommendations for coding modifications that are going to go into production and be seen by everybody in the world who can do a view source in their browser. So, coming into it with no practical experience means that you might understand it in theory, but you probably don't understand it in practice. And WAS is definitely a practical set of skills and a practical type of certification.
So just for high level, this is Sam. WAS is the technical digital accessibility background that our colleagues around the world use to make our digital content accessible for people with disabilities, not just what people consider apparent disabilities, but also considerations for non-apparent disabilities and engagement. So
yeah, it's for everything. You can design products to be more neurodiversity friendly. You can design products to be more dyslexia friendly. So none of the certifications are only about visible disabilities. And I choose the word visible. I mean, I've heard visible, hidden, non-apparent. I think visible and hidden are a little easier vocabulary wise. So, and then again, to repeat what I said earlier, I'm trying to think of our ratio at VMware. We've got 20 people on our accessibility team. I think we maybe have 6 or 7 people with the WAS. When we're opening up a WAS position, it allows the people with non-WAS certifications to not have to ask questions about code. We can make assumptions about the person's skill set and their practical coding experience with accessibility because of what we know that the certification tests for.
Super.
Otherwise, we'd only be able to have WASP people interview WASP people, and that gets really messy.
That does. So ideally, the technical requirements for WAS allows hiring managers and process to understand what's built in, what if somebody qualifies as a candidate, the experience they bring with them as a
Oh
base.
yeah, 100%. That's why it's critical to have something like this.
So we're going to move on to our next. How many people here read documents? I'd imagine everyone. How many organizations in the world create documents? I imagine all. If the world were as simple as just saying, instead of creating a document, just put it on the web. If we had millions of people around the world that could create accessible websites, it might be a different story. However, the world does still exist in sharing information via documents. So Accessible Document Specialist, the ADS, is our intermediate technical certification for people who have a minimum of 1 year's first-person experience performing the job tasks covered in the ADS body of knowledge. It's about writing and creating accessible content and remediating documents in authoring formats and final formats. So that's going to be word processors, spreadsheets, presentations, and desktop publishing. So this is a bit beyond using the accessibility checker. And it is not only about writing content, but also being able to remediate and deliver documents. So much of our world requires us to read documents to understand background information, as well as in education and training and our workplace that has documents. So ADS is that intermediate technical certification, and Beatrice also has earned ADS. So Beatrice, can we talk a little bit about considering ADS builds on some tenets of accessibility and equity for people with disabilities, but can you speak just a moment about how inaccessible documents impact people around the world, and why accessible documents, while it might not get as much attention as digital accessibility for the web and apps, but why document accessibility is really essential, and how we can really impact accessible document knowledge in our organizations without people being advanced. ADS also asks about training and advice to incorporate good practice with document accessibility. So Beatrice, I'll set that up for just a moment about ADS and ask you to speak a little bit about that and your motivation to pursue ADS. I can hear you. Beatrice, your microphone is off.
Thank you very much. It has to happen at least once. So I'm going to start with the motivation. Some years ago, I found some Microsoft trainings on accessibility. I was focusing more and more in the accessibility field as a designer. And in their platform, in the learning platform, they have some gamification elements. So I started doing more and more courses. And I got to the Office accessibility path. And I realized that if I was creating documents and giving talks on accessibility, I might as well walk the talk and reduce the amount of inaccessible content be created by doing my part. So I'm still learning. That I am certified doesn't mean everything I do is perfect, but for me, it means that I cared enough to learn more. I use the EduNext course you have as a member for free in the IAAP EduNext platform, and it was amazing. So all the stuff I learned there, it actually didn't help me to do the certification. It was much more practical than the certification itself. I found the certification to be very low level. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it was more about general accessibility and not so much about the technical parts of document accessibility. And the course on the EduNext is more technical, and it really helped me do better. So one thing I was very gladly surprised at Atos was the eco branding and the fact that corporate PowerPoints were tested for accessibility both in dark and light mode. It was very news to me. It was a bit mind blowing. So the corporate font, the colors, everything was tested and adapted for the best combination of readability, accessibility, and decarbonization. And it is beautiful. So you always have this thought from designers that accessibility has to be ugly. So this is also an example that I use with some of the colleagues. So when they say, you know, how can I do accessible and do a good design? I was very surprised, but it does make total sense that a little investment on the templates, and that is something you learn with the IAAP certification. These templates are used by thousands of our employees worldwide. So it has a humongous impact. We as a team are now working on new innovations related to document accessibility to support all types of organizations to easily remediate and create inclusive documents, because we have seen the impact in real life. So it's not the same to have to redo the accessibility every time you create a new PowerPoint. And we do create a lot of PowerPoints. There's this said death by PowerPoint. And we're also creating some paths and gamifications to get our colleagues in leadership excited about document accessibility. So we're providing certificates, stamps on the document, so that everyone can see that they walk the talk to and they created accessible documents. So these colleagues in leadership, they act as multipliers within their teams. We get them excited, and then they share with their teams, and coming from the top down, then people feel supported and justified to create accessible documents themselves. It's about accessibility at scale. And as you can see, I'm very excited about this. What an impact does this have? So I remember when I had my first child, I couldn't use the mouse for like a year because I was carrying her the whole time. And the possibility to be able to work with a keyboard was important to me. Or now at Atos, I was provided with voice interaction with my machine, so that I can also work without hands. But if the documents you create, they are not ready for that, the technology and the whole systems that I have in place, they're not they're useful, because you go to the core, and it creates a lot more effort and a lot more frustration. I always said when I was working in user experience that my job was to make people happy, to get rid of frustration and support them achieve their goals. I was never a designer that wanted to have their products and designs on a museum. I wanted people to actually use them and achieve their goals. That was my main goal. So creating accessible documents, and it's, as a designer, I also think on InDesign to create EPUBs or PDFs, but I also think about infographics. So if you create an infographic in Illustrator and you don't have a good reading order and you don't describe what you're showing there, you're robbing people of experiences, you're robbing people of access to information. We can go back to COVID, and there were some very good graphics to make people easier to understand the whole situation that they were in under a lot of stress. But if these graphics were not described and they were not in a good reading order for screen readers, there was a lot of people who didn't have access to these information. So that is key. Also, if you work with the government, I am in a very weird situation because I am a Spaniard living in Germany. So I have extra layers of complexity with all the things that have to do with government and paperwork. I'm also neurodiverse, so it also adds layers of complexity. So if you don't have the basics covered, it makes life worse for a lot of people.
And I'm going to ask Eric. Eric, can you speak to a moment from your personal lived experience about the difference that accessible documents make for you versus inaccessible documents, and the difference between one with a barrier and one that allows you full access?
A beautiful question. I think for me, the difference between an accessible document and the one which is not accessible, it's just like the difference between earth and the sky, like it's so joyous to experience a document that is accessible for me, because then I'm able to get the information just like any other person. I'm able to participate in different spaces just like any other person. So for example, when I get a document, for example, it's in the PNG format or it's an image, and I'm looking around, I've asked a person, help me here. And again, I have to ask again, and then I have to ask again. It's so frustrating. But when I get an accessible document, for me, it's so beautiful. It feels like, this person first considered or thought about me when they were making this document. And two, I'm able to interact and actually give feedback to such a document, just like any other person. So for me, it really overcomes a lot of barriers when a document is accessible. Yeah. And I hear also this from my other colleagues, my friends with disabilities, because then when they get document, they are not, and sometimes they are very important documents. So for example, it may be a contract sent in terms of a Google Doc or something like that, and maybe they are not able to interact with that. Then it becomes very frustrating. Let me give you one good example. I got a document, it was a contract, and I needed to sign it immediately, but I took about 2 months simply because every time I try, it's not accessible. It just doesn't download the way I want. And every time I'll ask someone, because now with a screen reader, then a sighted person, again, does not experience what, let's say, I'm hearing or see, or whatever he's seeing is not what I'm hearing. So there's that interaction barrier there. But when you send a document that is accessible, for me, it's so beautiful. It's so joyous to experience such. I think for me, it's really like, you've actually considered me, and that's important to me.
And so I'm going to tie this back. I believe that, Eric, this is about CPACC. In the content about CPACC, we cover and attempt to explain and help people understand the barriers that people with disabilities face, the adaptive strategies. Hey, can you help me with this versus assistive technologies? And so I believe that CPACC will cover the importance of core foundations to understand, even if it's not your own lived experience, but to start to cover some understanding of a variety of disabilities and how we can work to remove those barriers and understand better how to design with intention access to rights for people with disabilities.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, being a person with visual impairment, my experience has been of that of person who is blind or visually impaired. So my interaction is through screen readers and all that. So basically, I was limited in my view of people with disabilities. But CPACC provided me with an opportunity to see what are the needs of people who are neurodiverse. What assistive technology can we use or can they have so that they can access different opportunities just like me? So if I'm used to using a white cane, screen reader and all that, so what can they use? So what about people who are hard of hearing or deaf? What are those technologies that they can use around? So for me, CPACC provided me with that knowledge. So when I'm talking, for example, to companies, to organizations, and I'm sharing that there's actually something you can put in place so that this person can perform on an equal basis with others, just like any other person, then they actually start seeing that, we cannot limit ourselves to, let's say, hiring people who are deaf, or just people who are blind, but we can actually include people who even have other disabilities, be deaf, blind, or be neurodiverse, or intellectual disabilities, and so on. Basically, for me, what it provides, it's the light that any other person, if we put the assistive and make accessibility, put it at their disposal, then they're able to just perform, be at school, at work, even just in a social grounds. Yep.
And then Sherry, this is Sam. Sherry, I'm going to ask Sherry to speak to a little bit about accessible documents. How can we, for those of us that work in advocacy and accessibility, every organization creates documents. What do you find is the best way to create accessibility champions to teach document accessibility, or to encourage recognizing that skill set as a value add for organizations?
So we've probably taken a slightly different approach to it at VMware, which is we are using HTML for a lot of our documentation rather than PDF. Where we see this come into play the most is PowerPoint, as somebody else previously mentioned, for training programs, for example, or presentations. and email. People don't think of emails as a document, but trust me, email is a document. So we do, again, train people through our advocacy program. We have accessible meetings and events training that a lot of our department administrators go through to make sure that they know how to do PowerPoint checking. It's not the be all and end all, because we all know that automated testing can't do it all, but at least they know it. And then we also convey that to our vendors. Don't forget, your business, your employees aren't the only ones who are developing PowerPoint decks and sending emails. If you're bringing in an outside vendor to speak, they're going to have a PowerPoint deck, and you need to put it in your contract that if the deck is part of the presentation, if they're handing it out, which they should be, then those things need to be accessible as well.
So thank you, Jerry. We're going to come back to talking about how our IAAP certifications advance the implementation of CRPD. So that's the goal. I mean, our goal, each of us that work in accessibility and advocacy, is to move beyond awareness. So we know that we want people to be aware of accessibility, but as we move beyond awareness, our goal in IAAP certifications is to advance the implementation of the CRPD and advance organizational maturity. So we want organizations to build their accessibility knowledge and their access for people with disabilities into their processes so that it is part of practice. Our IAAP certifications, people often ask, who created them? How do I know? They are by accessibility professionals for accessibility professionals. So the actual content, structure, and process is all built by your colleagues, and includes people with disabilities as key leaders in that volunteer work for the content and the goals of those certifications. So the goal in each of those certifications is always going to be to advance access and equity for people with disabilities. But the question that we want to connect the dots here for beyond G3ict and IAAP's missions is how professional certifications from IAAP can help organizations, number one, understand those skills. And I think Sherry mentioned that, capacity and proficiency towards their commitment to the tenets of CRPD. One of the other goals is how certifications help hiring managers assess that knowledge and experience when hiring for accessibility and roles that relate to disability. And for you as an individual, how you might be able to use these certifications to distinguish yourself and use that to help advance your work, whether that's in advocacy and or your own professional work world. Can we just take a moment? There were some questions about, we've answered some questions in Q&A about process and information, but can we take just a moment about how the certifications in the core, and Sherry, since you're on the certification committee, may I ask you for a moment to speak about the goal of the certifications to advance access and rights for people with disabilities, but also how our colleagues, the actual accessibility professionals and experts, are the ones that design and structure this to establish a core level so that we can ensure there is quality in these certifications. Can you speak to that for just a moment?
Of course. So I tell everybody, if the WAS was easy, everybody would do it. It's not easy. And in fact, I have not done it. So, even though I'm fairly well known in the accessibility community, it's not a skill set that I use on a daily basis. From the hiring manager perspective, if the WAS is too easy, then too many people will pass, and it waters down the value of what does it mean to be certified. If it's too hard, like I'm not going to name names, but there's a particular screen reader that has a pass rate for their certification that's incredibly low, like under 25%, I think. If it's too hard, it discourages people who might be qualified from taking it. It's not meant to be an exclusive community. It's meant to be this bell curve where you filter, you want the core people under the bell curve to take the test, and if they have the skills, pass the test. And so that's what we're going for on the certification committee when we're choosing the score that must be achieved to pass for any given cohort. We're looking for that break point where it's obvious that we've got those needs balanced. The needs of, screening out the people who obviously don't really understand the material while rewarding the people who do.
And Eric, as a DARE Academy Scholarship recipient, do you looking back now that you've been through the process and more than a year out, do you find that to be encouraging as a way to focus on access for people with disabilities and move towards equity, the concept behind CPACC and the preparation for that?
Thank you, Sam, for that. Just a quick reference to the question you asked me about documents, and basically also relating to this was for me actually taking on the course. The fact that there was a whole body of knowledge that was accessible to me, that I could use my machine and read and be able to just get the knowledge, extract the knowledge, and the document was accessible. For me, additionally, what helped was, the online learning. I mean, as I was taking on the learning, someone called to ask me, so how can we make something like an aptitude exam be accessible to some of the screen readers? Before taking on the course, the online course by CPACC, I could not be able to answer that question. But for me, I could give an example that, through, if you take on this course by IAAP, then actually you can find an exam that is accessible that you can do. So taking on the course, of course, it was intense, but I love the opportunity that I was given by the DARE Academy the whole year to, just learn, just experience the materials and do the, the related questions at the end of each module. There were about 6 modules. For me, I enjoyed, taking on those modules, experiencing the questions at the end of it, because really it makes the what I did learn stick. And at the end of it all, I had this experience of just having a sort of a pseudo exam timed. And I was able to do that, and I experienced that, as sort of a main exam. And the other thing I really did enjoy was the opportunity of a reasonable accommodation, like taking on the exam and ask, so I may, within the 2 hours, maybe if I'm not able to finish this, I can call on IAAP and say, request for an opportunity for a reasonable exam. So for me, this is an opportunity that I really is extending to other persons with disabilities, because this is something that they can show to others. There is a whole network, a body of experienced accessibility professionals, and I happen to meet Christopher Lee just the other day, Dr. Lee, just the other day here in Nairobi during the accessibility conference, and 2 other colleagues that have taken on the CPACC, and I think it's a great network. I like the fact that the communication continues even after I've taken on the course. So there is always the webinars that are there. There's always the information sharing. And so for me, Sam, I think it's a course that I can extend to persons with disabilities and even to those without disabilities. Really, it makes us equal, has no equal.
Thank you, Eric. And Eric mentioned that he had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Lee. On the screen that we're displaying now, we're displaying three graphics or logos. They're blue circles, and they have IAAP on the top line of text and the abbreviation for the certification below, CPACC on the left, WAS in the middle, and ADS at the end. These are our three that we've covered today because they directly relate to digital accessibility and information communication technologies as it relates to Article 9 of CRPD. We also have a built environment certification as well, but we focus today on our digital accessibility for this discussion. But Dr. Lee, since you are here with us today, did you want to take a moment to speak a bit, if you're open to that? I think he's still here, about the connection between IAAP as an organization and their mission and CRPD and for rights of access and equity for people with disabilities.
Hello, Sam. It's Christopher. Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's G3ict and Mohammed addressed some of this during the opening. Was founded in 2006 with the whole goal of promoting the CRPD. So the training that is developed around the certifications as well as other areas with IAAP directly links to the importance of promoting those goals, the United Nations goals, 2020, 30 goals. So anything strategically that IAAP does within our plan is pushing back to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the challenge is, you know, we serve, as IAAP, we serve, you know, all industries and all sectors. And we want to make sure we're giving the best benefits to not only our individual members, but also our organizational members. And with that, we have to really listen to our members and tie into that. And a lot of those are individuals that are linked to what the UN is doing right now. So that's real important. And the second piece to that is the strategic partners that we have developed through our connections with the UN. That being this afternoon, we have a UN Habitat session that we're collaborating with not only the UN Habitat Agency, but also the World Blind Institute, the Union, Your Blind Union. So that those strategic partners are critical in making sure that we stay on track with promoting the CRPD.
So I wanted to make sure, this is Sam, we have a few minutes left in the hour. If there were questions from our amazing group of 54 attendees that have come to join us today, do you have specific questions for any of our panelists who hold the certifications, our volunteer leader who helps govern this, or for our staff? We have about 8 minutes remaining in our hour. Would you like to type questions into Q&A? And Mohammed, while people are sharing information here, Mohammed, did you want to come back and speak a little bit about DARE Academy for just a moment? I know we're on the cycle 3 of DARE Academy, but just for a moment to explain what the DARE Academy Scholarship Fund supports.
Sure. Thank you, Sam. DARE Academy was founded 2 years ago. Actually, it was launched during the 14th session of the Competence Parties in New York. And it's an academy that offers opportunity for persons with disabilities, particularly advocates who are passionate for issues of digital accessibility and accessible ICTs, to become more vocal through their advocacy efforts promoting the rights of persons with disabilities, digital accessibility in their countries. And the priority in our programs are given to persons with disabilities coming from the global south. The academy has mainly 3 programs. The first program is the scholarship program that Eric talked about, and we are proud of having him as well. And this year we have launched the third cycle of the scholarship. It's a scholarship that allows persons with disabilities to have the chance to get their certification, the CPACC certification with IAAP. The second program is a webinar series where we are hopefully going to document best practices based on G3ict digital accessibility right evaluation index that we are hoping to have its third edition starting at the end of this year. And the webinar will also allow students to have more knowledge about the digital accessibility. And the third program is a
Sam, this is Christopher. I think we've released.
Yeah,
lost Mohammed.
I think we may have lost Mohammed's connection there. We'll see if Mohammed's connection can be restored. I wanted to take a moment to address some questions that came in through the chat and questions and answers. So are the certifications, will they be offered in other languages? We do have CPACC and WAS that have been translated into German, and that is under process in Spanish. And we will be exploring extending languages into several of the United Nations primary languages. So Mark, I believe that we will be investigating French as an option in the next year. So hold with us as we move forward with that. The next question that came in is about how much time does it take to study or prep for CPACC? And I'll post on the about page for CPACC. There is a list of preparation suggestions. We recommend each person consider 6 to 8 weeks to study at a minimum, and being able to dedicate 5 to 10 hours of time to study as your life allows. So each person will have a different experience. Mariana asks about the courses, the IAAP EduNext courses. So that's the document accessibility and CPACC. You don't have to be a professional to take those courses. Those are classes. Our professional certifications are not tied to classes or courses or educational programs. The WAS certification does require 3 years of experience in technical digital accessibility. CPACC has an initial ask of people to have at least 1 year experience in accessibility, but also if they're interested in moving their career towards accessibility and disability inclusion, that's also acceptable. So let me keep going through these questions. If you're trying to find an organization, find a position as an accessibility analyst, I think a great place to start is if you're an IAAP member, to look at the job board and the connections communications, as well as considering the meetups and workshops that are posted on our opportunities. And there is a website called A11Y Jobs. Accessibility Jobs is a great place to find out what's in the market. And then let's see, Mohammed is back. Mohammed, let me just go through these other questions that are posted. But Mohammed, you're back. So I'll give you a chance. We've got 2 minutes left. So Mohammed, I'm gonna let you come back to the mic.
Sure, I'm sorry I got disconnected. I'm here at a hotel where the internet connection is not stable. I'd just like to end by just highlighting one important information about the Academy. The Academy has an advisory board consisting of major international disability and development organizations, particularly Disabled People's International, International Disability Alliance, World Blind Union, Leonard Cheshire Institute on Disability, DAISY Consortium, CBM Global, and Disability Inclusion. So I invite you to visit our webpage on G3ict.org. website. And if you are interested, we welcome you to apply for or like connect with us. Their academy at G3ict.org, and we're happy to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a question in Q&A about product management and accessibility. I believe that you could apply CPACC to product management and project management. We don't have that in a queue at the moment, but absolutely the digital product development, the software development lifecycle in WAS is key to product management for digital accessibility as well. And we're coming close to the time for our hour. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I see there's one hand raised. Let's see. Regina, you had your hand raised in chat. Did you want to ask a question? No? Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Sherry, Beatrice, Eric, thank you so much for making time today to speak about your experience as people who've earned our certifications and participate in your own advocacy and equity for people with disabilities. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for the invite.
Bye.